Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. There are lots and lots of things going on in the world today. The digital transformation, the digital revolution, the new things happen in people's lives. The world's starting to open up a little bit, which is all great to see. And the challenges that we enjoy talking about so much here are ones that are touching in our personal lives, but also the opportunities that are being opened up here. And certainly in the business world, we're seeing a great deal of that as well. And such a significant part for those things moving forward is this idea of leadership. So one of our special monthly guests, Christian Anschuetz, talks about leadership. He has said before, and I believe him completely. He's not trying to speak, from the point of view of a total expert, but just he's a student of leadership, has understood it, been involved in it, and feels it's something that's missing in the world today. And so we'll have a good chat about that. Christian, welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. It's fantastic to have you.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be here, and always a great pleasure to have a conversation with you.
Christian, before we jump into the leadership thing, I gotta say, if this is your office, that is a sweet office.
You're very kind. I can't do it here, just given the context, but I do have to admit that I might have one of the coolest offices in North America. This is just the background, and it doesn't look like much maybe, but it's a mezzanine to a barn. And in this barn and in my office, from innovation materials to all sorts of interesting tools and equipment, shall we say, is pretty much almost, in terms of material wise, everything I love material wise, not the things that I love the most, but certainly the material stuff is either near me or around me. And I have an office that's in the center of a large barn, which is kind of cool. By the way, because I'm a big sustainability freak, we're building a commercial greenhouse off of this that's going to have just incredible output capabilities and very, very high tech, I'm doing my own green acres kind of thing.
Christian, don't be Ebb.
Well, I always tell my lovely wife, Michelle, I always say she's the Ava Gabor. And the reality is she's really, really good at the planting and the growing of stuff. And if I had a way to, and I'm trying to get there, one of my objectives, actually personal objectives, is to control more of the supply chain, if you will, of what I put into my body. And, technology, and various commercial mechanisms have made it very possible for each and every one of us to do that. Some of us more than others. I feel very blessed that I actually get to even explore these things. But I think we're going to see agriculture go the way of energy, the way manufacturing is very likely going to go as well. And we are going to see more and more sort of fragmentation where people are able to take more and more control of what they grow and what they consume. Nice.
Well, it sounds like you're having fun both sort of exploring in that direction. And I think, it's somewhat tied to today's topic, being a little bit of a leader and inspiring others to see, here's some of what's possible, Christian. That is great. And if I'll keep my eyes open for a coolest office competition. We'll got to get you in there. Next, you're going to say you got a climbing rope in there.
I might just have a climbing rope. I'm always a Marine. I'll always be a Marine. I have to have a 20-foot climbing rope just so I can say that I can, I'm in my 50s. All right. I shouldn't admit that, but so I'm still young. I feel like I'm 25, although that's probably more a reflection of my maturity than it is my chronological age. But I do believe that I still try to meet the standard in terms of physical performance of what I had to do when I was in the Marine Corps. So I have to be able to climb a 20-foot rope within a certain period of time. And I'm happy to do that and at least try to live up to that challenge.
Outstanding. So Christian, the thread of leadership that comes through, I know that also there's some sort of anti-leadership list that you've made, pet peeves, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But it sounds like, among your other activities, if you've been talking to some fascinating folks out there, and I know you said there's somebody with a really big startup who's shared some ideas with you that you find quite inspiring.
Yeah, we in our for the audience here, you can imagine that Bob and I meet for a couple minutes prior to broadcasting here and just kind of say, oh, what's kind of fascinating that we can maybe touch on. And I just mentioned to you, Bob, that we I'm in the midst of writing a book. Okay, everybody does it. That's not the exciting part. What's exciting and what's interesting is that I was talking to the CEO, who's just an incredible CEO on so many different dimensions. I'm not going to name the firm nor the individual, but he's got a kind of a small startup. It's 4,500 people.
Wow.
He's doing very, very well. He's been prominently featured in like the who's who or the what's what of magazines and whatnot. Is a great innovative leader. And we were just talking about, like, what is he doing to ensure that he's getting, he's getting the most out of his work personally, and how that translates into him getting the most out of, his entire 4,500 person team. And what it came down to is, one of the first questions I asked was, okay, so tell me about, this thing. I asked him a very specific question, and his response was about, I do what I do because I'm doing it for my children, because our company is shaping the future of the world. Okay. And it is going to simply make the world a better place. And he was talking about this mission, and he was talking about this purpose. And then that purpose, again, was to shape the world for his offspring to hopefully inherit a better place than we have right now. Not that now's not bad. I'm not making a judgment, but just simply that better is the goal. Right. And in that conversation, I said, well, okay, so that's great. You have this purpose. I mean, tell me about, how does that translate throughout the whole of your organization? And this guy said, well, he goes, the leadership, he goes, everybody, the senior leadership is all on board. He goes, the challenge is getting the whole organization to feel that same way, to feel that same pride, to feel that same purpose. And I'm like, very good. I understand, because you're probably not paying your executive leaders the same as you're paying your, as he referred to them as line workers, key contributors, important leaders, great team members, but a difference in sort of the stratification of salary and whatnot. And he made it just such a great point when I said, well, isn't purpose in that case sometimes, this was me asking the question, not him saying that. I said, isn't purpose sometimes one of those things where it's almost like when you get paid enough, you have the privilege to have purpose? And I wrote down his response. I'm gonna look at this thing right now. He gave me a couple of great quotes, and I'll share one of them. But in terms of how he's thinking about and what they're doing in order to make sure the whole organization is motivated, and what a great leadership technique he's applying. He's getting their buy-in in the most tangible, important fashion, is that he's bringing this benefit of the short term and the long term together. And he says, equity is the answer to give all the privilege of purpose. And for that equity, which seems like an outpouring of resources to your workforce, which in fact it is, he will get back something. And he says that he's getting back something that is worth it 100 times over. It's going to propel the workforce forward. In fact, is going to make the company last decades, who knows, maybe even centuries into the future. And I just love this leadership technique from this great leader who's not satisfied with him having a purpose. He wants and is working towards, he's not there yet. He's not there. He would never say that he's there, but that he's inspired to make sure that everybody that's part of that organization shares in that purpose to the greatest extent possible. And this is why I call myself a student, Bob, is because, like, a quote like that, I never thought of it that cleanly, that concisely. And kudos to this gentleman that I hope to will be able to share with you who it is and the firm he represents sometime in a future discussion.
Okay. Christian, respecting, the you're keeping this a little bit tight here. Is there anything that you could share that indicates a little bit, how did he get this deeply purpose-driven organization across all levels of the company?
Well, so he, purpose and culture often go hand in hand. So let me kind of just switch from the purpose, because that's very specific to what they're trying to do. And I'm afraid if I get too explicit, we'll be able to ferret that out. Because they're really leading in a very, very important space. And I promise you, as soon as I can, I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you all about this individual in this company, because you all want to know about this company. It's a great company. And again, it's a great leader. But the question about this whole culture and how that ties to purpose, actually in some way ties to performance. So here's a leadership lesson. I don't know, it's a 301 level lesson. I believe, at least, that preference predicts performance nearly 100% of the time. If we like a thing, we're more likely to do the thing we're more likely to do, we're more likely to be good at. And in this discussion, I had my first sort of my personal epiphany, which is why we have to be students. We have to constantly study. We have to constantly come up with these new thoughts. As he's talking to me, I'm thinking, okay, purpose actually creates preference, which drives performance. And then the backdrop of that then is, what is the culture that kind of ties these things together? The purpose, the preference, and the performance. And one of the things he was talking about is very related to one of the things that I'm writing about, which is a culture of courage. And he says one of their greatest strengths in this firm is that they are a no-nonsense company in terms of how they view innovation. That innovation is a process, and the process is one of experimentation with a high, with an understanding that there's a high likelihood of failure. And in the failure comes learning. And so he's working very hard to drive this culture of candid, almost confrontational, we're candid, direct is a better word, direct feedback where, I can do something, Bob, you can go, hey, Christian, we talked about this in the past. Hey, Christian, you really blew that. It was terrible. Don't do that again, right? Which I think, Bob, you've actually told me that before. But and I'm like, oh, cool. That's my opportunity. That's my opportunity to learn. And he's making a process out of it, which is helping to create the culture that kind of is the wrapper around that purpose, preference, and performance. And I can't say enough about this thoughtful approach of building the culture necessary to compete and win in the spaces that they're targeting. I think it's it's inspired leadership, candidly.
Yeah. Christian, I want to then offer another example here of a company that I got to speak to one of their executives recently, but I knew about the company. I didn't know much about the company, but the company's name is Vari, VARI, and they start off with the standing desks, and now they make various types of adaptable, easy to use, easy to move office furniture. So the CIO there, his name is Jeff Denard. And I don't know, we talked half an hour or so. Anybody who did not know what he does in that company, if he never said, my title is Chief Information Officer, I don't think he would have had a clue. By the time we got to the end of it, he talked about leadership. They don't call the people who give his company money in exchange for its products, they're not customers, they're fans. He didn't force this. He probably said it 10 or 12 times during our conversation. It's just how they think about it. And it's deeply ingrained in that culture. And at one point, I asked him a little bit about the, changing role of any CXO position, but especially the CIO, since that's what he's in. And he said he's felt for a long time. He said, and he had his hands like this. He said, I have 3 jobs. He said, my first job is to be a leader. He said, my second job is to be a business person. And my third job is to be the Chief Information Officer. And he said, it's big gaps from each one of those steps to the other. He said, I don't take my role as CIO unseriously. He said at all. He said, it's a critical part to what we do. But he said, if on top of that, I'm not looking at the whole business and how we can apply some of my expertise there, and moreover than that, to all the people in the organization and to our, as he put it, fans, if I'm not trying to be a leader to put the best into our organization, then our fans are not going to get the best out of our organization. And it was just a pretty remarkable conversation. He said, about the people who report to him. He said, they're the real experts. He said, so I hire people who are smarter than me, better than me, more capable than me, and have higher potential than me. And then he said, I try to keep out of their way. And he said, I support them with compassion and love and enthusiasm and confidence. And he said, that's just sort of permeates through the organization. And I just thought, man, if he can get, a couple more people at the different levels, then you get that, not just a cascading effect, because that implies stuff just rolls one way, but you get that force multiplier up and down the organization and sideways. That it sounds like, that type of culture that you're describing. Sorry to go on like that, but it just what you had described. And then this very, very intriguing spot from Jeff Denard is his name at Vary. It was really something. I think you would love this guy.
Oh, well, you know what? Please introduce me to
Yeah.
Jeff. I'd like to make his acquaintance. That sounds like the kind of person I'd like to talk to. I mean, certainly there is nothing that you said that sounds anything but other than fantastic. I mean, and then you, not just about Jeff, but about something you added. I mean, let's be honest. The role of the leader is to force multiply
Yeah.
the organization that they lead. That is our job. Our job as a leader is to, depending on where we are in the pecking order, because the scope changes. So it's an issue of scope, but the attributes are the same. The characteristics are the same. But, most of your executive leaders, I think you said he was a CIO.
Yes.
So, I mean, his job is primarily to make what, 3 to 5 major decisions a year, and then to do everything that you just said, which is nurture, coach, enable, empower, learn from, otherwise, break down the barriers, celebrate the victories, etc. I mean, and you said it through him, perhaps, or he said it through you, rather, perhaps better. But I mean, that's our job, right? Is to force multiply, or be a force multiplier for the very people that work for us.
Yeah. And Christian, I thought there was another thing in there that I just thought was really terrific how he brought this up, right? And this has always puzzled me some in business, right? When, I was in the publishing industry for quite a while. And when we'd bring up the notion of doing what's called a redesign, you'd redesign a magazine, there'd be a lot of people like, oh man, that's risky. And I would say, why is it risky? You say, well, we got a brand out there and it's established. And if you change it, some people are going to like it, but maybe a lot of people won't. And I said, but all right, let's put the word redesign over here. And instead, let's say we're going to improve it. We're going to improve our product. We're going to deliver more value to audiences. And I said, well, yeah, but that's different. That's not a redesign. I was like, but so in that overall context, one of the things that Jeff said, so he's in this big warehouse type space, and it's certainly a showcase for all of Vary's products, because they've got partitions and walls, desks, chairs, other things like that. And he said, we make it a point to move our offices around pretty thoroughly throughout this headquarters organization and their regional offices. He said at least 3 times a year. And he said it's a celebration of the stuff we make, and it's an opportunity for the organization to find new neighbors, new connections, and to get everybody being able to see things from a fresh perspective and not feel like, well, I'm part of the over here group and those people are the over there group, and I'm not sure how we're connected. But it was just such, in a way, Christian, it was like, I guess, so many wonderful ideas. It was simple, right? I don't mean that it's easy to do, but it was a simple idea that if you really embrace it up and down the organization, side to side, and this company's growing explosively. And he specifically said this thing of shuffling the offices around. He said, I think that's a big part of it. Whereas some people might look at that and say, oh God, it's disruptive. Don't do that. You grow even faster if you just don't shake things up.
Well, it's this gentleman, Jeff, I think you said is his name. He's full of all sorts of great, interesting insights and wisdoms and whatnot.
Kristen, that's a great point. I want to come back to that in just a second, but first, a word from our sponsor, BMC. BMC wants to know, is your business on its A game? That's when systems are intelligent by learning from markets, where automation is paramount yet effortless, and when technology and people work as one in an enterprise. The A game is your business at its absolute best. BMC calls this the autonomous digital enterprise. Find out more at bmc.com/agame.
Yeah, there's a lot to focus on there. But you said it again. You said it. Sometimes the simple things aren't easy, but the simple things can be so powerful. So again, not to repeat something just for the sake of repeating it, but there is power in repetition. Let me say that again. There's power in repetition. Last time we talked about, there's no action without an after action. The simple notion, that, you do a thing and then you review the thing with candid feedback, and every opportunity, kind of to that interview I was talking about, is an opportunity to learn, is an opportunity to improve. These things are actually very, very difficult because there's a lot that has to go into it. Like, we have to have the courage, again, to have direct, not confrontation, but direct, candid feedback, and accept it, and accept feedback as a gift, even if sometimes it hurts a little bit. But what's interesting too, and we could do an entire, series of podcasts on, and which is, well, you said it was Jeff's the CIO, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing that makes a group of people love an old system like introducing a new one. So this idea of redesigning, so that sounds new. I know, I really like what I have, and please don't mess with what I have, actually becomes analogous to why, going back in time, why so many big businesses struggle so mightily to find their next future, because they get this crack addiction, if you will, to their current revenue stream, and nothing kills a new venture like the core of the business. Yeah. And again, now we have to talk about inspired leadership to help organizations do another fundamental activity of leadership, which most leaders are terrible at, which is managing paradox, or the and statement. Mm-hmm. You have to meet your obligations for today, and you have to look to a new future that might look different, maybe even radically different, and you have to invest accordingly. Great book out there, Winning Now, Winning Later, from the former CEO of Honeywell, actually encapsulates that notion pretty well. And yet, so darn hard for leaders to go into new areas. It takes a lot of courage to fight the fact that actually that redesign is kind of scary. Improve sounds good, because you know what that means to me? Redesign sounds like I don't know what I'm going to get. Improve means I'm going to get something incrementally better. And incrementalism is the name of the game, folks, even though incrementally you're going to lead your business out of business.
And the speed at which that incremental drop into the death spiral, it seems to be faster and faster, right? It used to be companies, they didn't even know it, right? It'd take them a couple decades, like, well, we're not growing the way we'd like, but we still find our core audiences, core customers, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden they look around, they said, we don't have new products, we don't have new talent in the organization, we don't have new customers. Quick, what do we do? How do we shake things up? But by then, the thing's gone. Christian, I want to say one more thing about that redesign stuff, right? Because to me, it was like, this can be such a positive if you go out to the market, right? To advertisers, to readers, to other influence shapers in the media field, and say, we have something that's pretty good based on the data and the things that we're hearing from a lot of folks. We can make it better. Here are some prototypes we've put together. Give us your input. Tell us what you think. Help us co-create this future together. But it was like, oh gosh, we had to open up a branch office somewhere that was sealed off from the rest of the world, because if anybody found out, I just used to laugh, but to say, you got to take yourself at least appropriately seriously, but anything above that is dangerous. And I just thought, man, we're not splitting the atom here, folks. We are making our product better. And if we're afraid of doing that because of what some people might think, maybe we should go into a different line of work.
Yeah, candidly, I think there's a lot of, executive leadership in at least corporate America, probably corporations everywhere, but I'll speak to corporate America, that actually need to find a different line of work. I find most executive leaders, when you ask them a simple question, like, oh, how customer focused are you? Oh, we're customer obsessed. I mean, how could you ask that? I mean, clearly we are all about the customer. When was the last time you actually sat down and listened to one, and put yourself in their shoes, applied a little empathy to understand the problems and the challenges that they actually have, versus leaping to trying to sell more of what you already sell? When was the last time you put yourself in that situation?
Well, Christian, you have to understand, we have teams that do that.
Oh, it's always somebody else though. It's always somebody that knows. When it comes to this leadership thing in the game, it's always they know somebody who knows somebody who talked to the customer, who told them that thing and that data point. As long as it's pointed in the right direction and quarter to their brain, it's a trend.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then Christian, they said, "Oh no, Chris," but I promise you, I will talk to my executive assistants, and next quarter, I promise, I am going to clear at least a couple hours, and I'm going to talk to customers. That demonstrates to you that on the customer obsessed thing, on a 1 to 10, we're an 11.
So I'm a professor at the business school at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and I give my students a little bit of homework. And these are all, I mean, the average age I think is in the low 40s. These are all very accomplished, incredibly bright students. I mean, I do it because I learn more than I'm able to teach, right? And I don't mean that as some sort of like BS hyperbole. I mean, I actually truly believe that. But I give them this bit of homework because they're all like, oh, I make them repeat. The number one thing in business you focus on is the customer. Every single class, I make them repeat that. And they think I'm crazy at first. And then I give them a little bit of an assignment. I said, I want you to go back to work. And in a week, when we have our next session, I want you to tell me out of the next 10 meetings you have, how many of them are directly related to your customer, and report back percentage wise. Now, unless they're specifically in sales,
yeah.
What do you, just a guess, what do you think now my average is across asking this class after class after class, hundreds of students? What do you think the average
30%.
is? Yeah, that's it. 30%. So I'm adjusting up, by the way. And I think that the number is actually lower, but I mean, think about all this time. I mean, of course, we're so customer obsessed, yet let's be honest. Let's get the average management team member, operating executive, CEO, and say, okay, let's look at your schedule. What percentage of your meetings are directly focused on a customer, and specifically a customer need?
Yeah.
I think they're not nearly as obsessed as they think that they are. I think they're not nearly as focused as they believe they are.
And Kristen, you've talked before about the OODA loop, and if the first O is, what you observe, and if what you observe is mostly 70%, 80% internal, all the other steps in the loop are fine, but you're not going to really have much of a clue about what's going on in the external world. Your thoughts, your ideas, your priorities are being more and more shaped by, what goes on the inside. Your heart can be in the right place, but your mind and your focused and your energy and your ambition are going to be elsewhere. They're going to be split apart, which doesn't make for the most effective outcomes.
No, it doesn't. And we really have to be very, very aware that, groupthink is a real threat. And, it's fueled by a very fundamental, very obvious and ever-present bias, which is confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we're in business, you were playing out the scenario. Customers love what we give them. Okay, what's that based on exactly? Well, we got an NPS score. Oh, great. What do your prospects look like for the future? And how fast are you growing? How fast could you be growing? So many of these companies are looking over a shoulder right now going, oh, God, I know there's something out there that's going to come and get me. And I got to hire a chief digital officer, right? Because it's digital, right? Uh-huh. I mean, there's something out there, it's digital. So let's do that. So they hire somebody, and then they anoint someone with the title, and they're like, oh, I got it covered.
Yeah.
And they haven't fundamentally adjusted their strategy. They haven't fixed their governance models to actually enable these explorations in these new spaces. And what they're really doing is they're setting themselves up for a problem, because markets move, customer segments change, and as new technologies and new capabilities arrive and emerge, well, somebody's going to find a new way to satisfy your customers in a way that you're not doing it. The need is ever present. How you address the need, well, that's what's subject to change, especially to your point at the cyclic rate that we're talking about. I mean, these things the world's changing like this, and companies that better have, a fundamental understanding of that ground truth and create the capabilities that allow them to adjust to these changing market wants and needs. And that means they also then have to be really sensing not just the technological and external business environment, or landscape rather, but they also really, really need to focus on the most important thing in business, which is their customer.
Yeah. Yeah. Christian, I know that you mentioned here you're a professor at UNC now, fantastic school, but your undergraduate, you were at University of Michigan, right?
Yeah, that's where I went to school first. Ann Arbor. I was born and raised in Ann Arbor. I didn't have a choice.
Okay.
I was raised there. I had to go to U of M.
Well, there was a professor in the business school there for many years who I think has shaped my thinking about business, and as much or more than anybody. C.K. Prahalad was his name. And, when you were talking about a company's ability to satisfy a need, he said, that's great. He said, everybody wants to do that. But he said, I think, he said, the age of customer satisfaction is going to yield to one of customer loyalty or customer delight or customer dazzle. And he said, what do you do when you're satisfied? He said, you eat a big Thanksgiving dinner, you're satisfied, you fall asleep. He said, I don't want customers being satisfied and fall asleep. I want them engaged and after me with ideas. Hey, that's pretty cool, but you could make it better, do this, do this, do this. So he brought this up probably 12 years ago. And I think the model that he proposed, sort of that pulls all this together, aligns with a lot of what you've been saying here about leadership and that notion to get the hell outside yourself. So he said broadly, he said, I'm not trying to break this out real precisely, but he said there's been 3 ages in the world of business. He said there was make and sell was the first one. He said then there was listen and respond. He said, that's great. He said, but today companies have to be able to anticipate and lead. He said, the only way you can have the right sort of anticipation is if your sensors and all your input streams are in the world outside coming in. And by anticipating, then you can lead because you're in lockstep with what's going on the outside. So I just wonder what your fellow Wolverine buddy there, what you thought of that.
Oh, I love it. The key to this, let me ask you this is so obvious. I'm going to ask the question anyway. They're leading questions. All right. Your Honor, I am going to lead the witness here. Okay. So Bob, let me ask you, if you are given an opportunity to solve a question, do you think you're going to be better at solving the question or solving an issue, a challenge, seizing an opportunity, if you do it by yourself or with, say, 100 people that are in your company? Which is better, you or the 100 people?
100
okay.
people.
Now let's just say the same question, but your company's now 10,000. You and your closest 100, or you, that 100 plus the full 10,000 of the company?
Yeah. Full 10,000.
All right. Now here's the stretch and what most companies don't get. Okay. What is better? You and your infinite wisdom within your company, your core capabilities, and the 10,000 people that make up those capabilities, and the clients and the ecosystems and partners and suppliers that could be part of solving that question too. And now comes the answer. The answer is that there are ecosystems that all these companies need to immerse themselves into so that they can find better answers faster and more cost effectively to benefit their customer segments. But hold on. Sounds obvious, right? These are leading questions. Christian, why are you asking me these leading questions? I'm so lucky. I get to do this kind of work with so many different companies. Let me give you the 3 things that companies that do innovation theater, the first 3 steps that they make. Here's innovation theater 101. And let's see if we know any companies that do this. First thing, I'm going to build an innovation center because nothing says innovation like 4 walls. Number 2, I'm going to create a corporate venture arm because I got a little bit of money and I know how to spend it. And then number 3, hire some bright girl, bright boy from Google or Amazon or something. And then there it is. That's I got to take the quick road to innovation. And I'm going to do those 3 things. And they fundamentally miss out on the most important aspects. Not that those aren't important aspects too, but they're not the most important. That's why most companies stink at this. I mean, they're absolutely terrible at it. Where in there is the strategy? Where in there is the governance? Where in there is the focus on the culture necessary to create a truly innovative capability, because culture and company performance, they go hand in hand, especially in this space. Where is there the extension of your capability by including ecosystems and either immersing yourself in them if you don't have mass, or creating them if you do? I mean, where are these steps? And all too often these steps get ignored, and to the detriment of the companies themselves. You're touching on all these great subjects. We could spend hours on each of these.
Well, Kristen, I want to ask you about, see if there's a pet peeve of the month here that you want to mention. But first, I just want to say, I love jokes. The problem is I can either remember the setup or the punchline, but I rarely remember the combo. So one of the punchlines that I remember, the joke is about secret agents from 3 different countries, and they're trying to see who's the best secret agent. And at the end, one of the secret agents is outside, and he's got a donkey in a headlock, and he's pounding the donkey on the head with a stick, saying, "Say you're a rabbit." And I always get that image, sometimes talking about companies, right? Start an innovation lab in a building, start a venture arm that you don't know anything about, and you'll run it the same way you run the way your own finances, and then hire a person and think that that'll change it. But the culture of the company doesn't change anything else. But if you just sort of say it insistently enough, and get your stick and pound something with it, then somehow there's a belief that it'll change. And I don't know, that is one of those, I think of your line of the great truths of life, and companies just have to get past that. There's no way. So tell me, my friend, what about a pet peeve of the month here?
Well, I was going to go in a different direction, but we started talking about that customer and the homework assignment around the meetings and how many of them were directly related to customers. Here's a thing that really frustrates me about business, and it really starts with leadership, is mistaking work with meetings. As leaders, again, our job is to make a few decisions and enable those that work for us to execute against our intent. If you don't know what I'm talking about, folks, go back to the previous episode where we talked a lot about leadership through intent. To make the 5 decisions, or how many ever decisions we make over a period, we have to spend quite a bit of time doing this thing. It's called thinking. We need to constantly invest in ourselves, develop our understanding, be open to learning, be open to failing and learning as a result of it. And those things don't happen in meetings. They don't. Folks, if your job as a leader is to be a force multiplier, just do the little same homework assignment yourself and look at the next 10 meetings you're in. Are those meetings where you're leading? Are those meetings that you're leading to some great destination that's going to directly benefit your customer and your customer segment? Or are you marking time? And candidly, most meetings are marking time. That's my pet peeve for the week, Bob.
Well, Kristen, I always get, I was smiling as you were describing that, because I always think it's funny at the end of a Zoom call or something like that, somebody say, well, okay, it's 25 after the hour, I'll give you back 5 minutes. Like, well, how about if next time you take 5 and give me back the 25, so we don't have a half-hour meeting that it didn't need to be half an hour, it was 25, could have been 20, 15, 10, so, but that's a good one. That's a good one, my friend, mistaking work with meetings.
Yes, indeed. As always, I enjoy these conversations immensely. I walked away with a number of things from this myself. And I do actually want to meet that CIO, because he sounds like an inspired leader himself.
Yes, absolutely. I'll make that introduction pronto here. Kristen, always a pleasure. Good to have you. And, maybe next time, if it's possible, maybe you'll show a couple of your toys there in the office.
All right, I'll have to I'll clean it up ever so slightly. That would be my pleasure. Thank you.
Just a little. All right, folks, and thanks to all of you for being with us here at Cloud Wars Live and talking with our friend Christian Anschuetz about leadership and purpose and performance, preference, how all those fit together. Hope it's a great month of May for all of you. We'll see you again soon.